All right, so I am not going to go back through all those aquatic slides. I feel like we did that yesterday, and that would take up too much of our time today. We've covered aquatic enough. We covered the 3 types of water enough. You will most definitely see aquatic, brackish, saltwater, freshwater on the quiz tomorrow. I think those are very easy words. I don't think those are too difficult. And you'll see stuff about the ocean. I'm not going to get super deep into lakes, streams, ponds, and things like that. Estuaries, absolutely. You know that's going to be on there because we talk about brackish water all the time. Terrestrial biomes. We're moving from the water biomes to the land biomes because terrestrial, as we wrote in our notes yesterday in brown, terrestrial means having to do with land. Having to do with land. These are the land biomes. And as we started to move into the land biomes, we moved straight into the American grasslands. How do I know this is the American grasslands? Because they start talking about prairies in North America in the notes. When we get into the other grasslands, like in Africa, they're going to call those the savanna, and I think we kind of started doing that, and then we kind of had to stop because of time frames, which is fine, not a big deal there. So yesterday, grasslands. This is as easy as saltwater, right? Saltwater has salt in it. Guess what grasslands has a lot of in it? Grass. I know, see, that's not very hard. No one should miss that when we do that tomorrow on the quiz. Grasslands is very easy. Grasslands, the most important plant life is grass. Are there bushes and shrubs and some trees? Yes, mostly grasses. We said that there are 2 main seasons. This is the first time we've stopped and talked about climate or seasons inside of a biome. 2 main seasons inside the grasslands, and they have winter and summer. Like pretty hot summers, pretty cold and harsh winters where they get lots of snow. You do not have to memorize all of these different types of things. Do, in the back of your mind, kind of keeping this in your mind, though, that a lot of the grains that we get to make our breads and cereals and things that we eat come from the grasslands of North America because the soil there actually is pretty good for growing things like that. Even though they only have 2 seasons, and they don't have 4 seasons like we do, the soil there is pretty rich and fertile, and that grows things very well. So some of these oats that we grow are very good that grow out there. We talked a little bit about grassland animals, and we watched a video about prairie dogs, and we said in order to live in the grasslands, like obviously if there's grasslands, there are a ton of herbivores. We talked about prairie dogs and deer and other ungulates, those hoofed animals. Like horses and deer, and they all have very special adaptations. Deer have very good ears, very good eyesight, and they can move very, very quickly. Their legs allow them to move very quickly to get away from the predators. Prairie dogs have a different adaptation. They live underground, which helps them get away because in a grassland, there's not a lot of places for you to run and hide. From predators, and predators can kind of ambush you in the grass as well, but they live underground, so they're able to get away. And we saw yesterday how they kind of chirp back and forth between the different mounds to let other prairie dogs know. I guess groundhogs do the same thing. Other prairie dogs know that there are predators around. We saw that when there was a badger running around, we could see them chirping back and forth. We talked about the adaptation of the grass. Grass, even when the animals eat it all the way down to the ground, or if a fire blazes through, grass is still able to grow because of its low growth point. We kind of joked that our dads and grandpas hate grass because it continues to grow no matter what we do to it. And every Saturday we walk outside saying, I just mowed this last weekend. But it just keeps on growing. Even if you cut it short, it keeps on growing. It grows back. Because again, grass has a very special adaptation. So I'm not going to go through and watch the prairie dog video again because we did that yesterday. I can't watch it again. Here are the grassland anchor chart notes. Now that we've gotten kind of deep into the Nearpod and where you're needing to look at notes, and I know I have some people at home today, I'm going to post inside of Nearpod. I'm just going to put like anchor chart notes or notes page. When you go on there, there are going to be 3 teachers. There'll be Bullens, there'll be Comento, there will be Tulloch. There will be a very special code beside each of those teachers. Please use your homeroom teacher's code. Nearpod only allows so many students in. So when my next class comes in, I can't use this code up here because about half of them would sign in and it would kick the rest of them out because they only suspect that our classes are so large. So please use, for the student notes, please just use your homeroom, and we'll see what that looks like. I'll try to get that done before class is over today. But again, here's like a summary of what we just said. Grasslands. The most important plant life is grass. 2 main seasons, summer and winter. The soil here is pretty good. Again, plants mainly life and tons of herbivores. It's not the wettest of biomes. It's not the driest of biomes. It's kind of in between, right? Obviously, it gets enough rain because grass is not going to grow without a whole lot of water, but it's not a tropical rainforest. It's not deciduous forest like where we live. Moving on to where we kind of got to yesterday, and we kind of had to stop and slow down because time was running out. We're going to move into the savanna. Now, the savanna is also a grassland. So take a wild guess what the main plant life in the savanna is. Grass, exactly. This covers half the surface of Africa, large parts of Australia, and we were talking about yesterday, like when all of that grass caught on fire a couple years ago now in Australia. Like it seemed like when you would look at the fire map, it looked like the entire continent of Australia was on fire. A lot of it was, because a lot of Australia is covered in grass, and India as well. And again, this is a giant portion of Earth's surface. It's not as much as the taiga covers, but it's a good portion of Earth's surface is grasslands. This is where the climate might be a little bit different. They have wet summers, they have dry winters, but the temperatures are between 68 and 86, pretty much year-round. That's not very cold. That's not overbearingly hot at 86. It can be warm, but it's not overbearingly hot when it's 86 degrees. Again, 6 to 8 months of summer, 4 to 6 months of a dry winter. They get around 30 inches of rain. Well, that's the max they get, sometimes a little bit more of that. Again, same thing in the savanna. You have the possibility of wildfires or human-caused fires in the dry season. I know we talked a lot about grasses. We're going to talk a little bit about one very, very important plant. And I think we started watching the video, but then we had to kind of stop it because class was just about over yesterday. The acacia tree, you can see that in the background. The acacia tree is pretty unique. It is a food source of giraffes, obviously being such a tall tree. And so that's one thing that's kind of unique. They are actually adapted to live in the grasslands, even though grasslands aren't really built for trees. They don't get a ton of rain. Acacia trees have adapted to that. They kind of store water inside of their bark, which is kind of neat. So I'll pause the video while we watch this video. So let's talk a little bit about the animal life, because again, a lot of the questions that you're going to get asked, they're going to kind of list off 3 or 4 specific plants and animals and ask you what would that most likely come from. And we've seen some of those questions before on our morning work, and they're typically easy to work through. But some of the animals that you might see in the savanna would be like elephants and zebras and lions, giraffes. You're definitely going to have a lot of herbivores, seeing that it's a grassland. That's something that you'll definitely see. One thing that the animals have to adapt to there, though, is the difference between the rainy season and the dry season. So when it's the dry season and there's not a lot of water, and you might be in a giant drought, animals are going to migrate. Who knows what that means when I say animals are going to migrate? Moving from place to place. So they're going to go from where there is no water to a place where there is water, or a place where the food is very little to a place where the food is there's a lot more access to food. Again, being that they are in the grassland, there's not a lot of places for you to hide, so you have to adapt to that. You have to have good eyesight, you have to be very fast, and then the predators have to adapt as well. They have camouflage, where they blend in to different places, which is a major adaptation that animals have to have in order to survive in the savanna. And we'll jot that up there in a minute. I think there's a slide in a few minutes. It's like a summary slide. All right, so we're going to talk about the coldest of all biomes. The coldest of all biomes. So when you write the word tundra in your notebook, somewhere right beside that, you need to write the coldest of all biomes. That's going to be the first things that I write on the anchor chart when I head over there in just a minute. It does cover about 1/5 of the land on Earth. That's pretty big. You do not need to know that it comes from a Finnish word that means treeless plain. However, what is a tundra? It is a treeless plain. So whatever Finnish word that came from is a very good description of what a tundra is. It is treeless. There's a multiple reasons why there aren't any trees. There are super high winds there, and we're going to talk about the permafrost. After about so many inches of ground, it's frozen. Roots can't go deep enough into frozen ground, and they can't survive anyway if they did. So even if there are trees, they would blow over. So you have to have very short roots, and you have to be very low to the ground to overcome the wind in order to survive in the tundra for your plant. The tundra is located in the Arctic Circle. Whoever spelled that did not spell that correctly. I think there should be a C in there. The Arctic Circle. A-R-C-T-I-C, the Arctic Circle. And it goes around the North Pole, or you could even go to the South Pole if you wanted to. So in Antarctica, in other cold environments, you're going to be talking about the tundra. It says it again. If it starts saying it over and over and over, it's kind of like estuary and brackish water. You know you're going to see this. The tundra is the coldest biome. It is also one of the driest. It is the second driest biome. It comes in second just behind the desert. That is something that you need to think about, that animals need to overcome and survive if they're going to be in that area. There's very little rainfall, less than 10 inches a year. And again, if you look, lots of that's going to fall as snow, right? Lots of that's going to fall as snow. In the winter, the temperature can be -50. -50. That's pretty cold. In the summers, it rarely gets above 50 degrees. That's not very warm. I mean, obviously warm enough to melt the snow, but not very warm. I want you to see this. Just remember this sentence here. You don't have to write this down. In the summer, the soil becomes very soggy. Just imagine if you had a sponge that was frozen, right? And you took that frozen sponge out of the freezer and you put it on your counter. And you came back like an hour later, the sponge would be very squishy, wouldn't it? You're going to hear them walking on top of this when we get to the Arctic bumblebee video. And it sounds so gross. It's like squish, squish, squish as they're walking. I would love to go, personally would love to go and do that. It sounds like it'd be so much fun. Here's another thing. We're going to write this in our notes for those of us that are sitting at our seats. Permafrost. Permafrost, permanently frozen. Does that make sense how they kind of squish those words together? And they just call it permafrost. That is a layer of the ground that is permanently frozen. Yes, the top layer of the permafrost thaws in the summertime, but the bottom layer stays frozen. And again, that's why we can't have a lot of trees here. It's going to be too cold, and you can't have trees if they don't have deep roots. So in the tundra, we have a very low diversity of organisms. Again, if you're going to live here, you got to learn to adapt to not a lot of water. It's the second driest biome, and bitterly cold conditions. So again, you might see here lichens and moss, small shrubs. Again, the plants that live here have very short roots, and they are very used to not having a lot of access to water. They are also used to the sunlight not being very intense because of the tundra. Where it's located in the poles, they don't get very intense sunlight. So again, I probably will put something similar to this on the anchor chart. Plants and animals here are tough. They do have to adapt to the cold and low rain amounts. So we need to think about some of the animals in here, and I know my video is about to stop, so smash the like button and subscribe. because it only does 15 minutes.